Good evening and welcome back to Russell Does Stuff. My name is Russell and I'm hanging out with Wayne tonight. And we both have heavy hearts right now. Um, Hulk Hogan passed away this morning, a little after I think 11 o'clock. And we've lost a bunch of celebrities this year. Every year we lose celebrities, and some of them, affect our lives differently than other celebrities when they pass away. Um, I remember where I was when Elvis passed away. I was at work with my dad. We were on Lombo Key, Florida, and my dad was doing a job out at the Colony Beach Inn Resort. And, Dad turned to me and he looked at me and he says, Elvis died. So I'll always know where I was on August 17th, 1977. I was hanging out with my dad. So I grew up watching wrestling. We only had like three channels on the television set, and Creature Feature, Wrestling, Star Trek, Bonanza, Lone Ranger, Superman. Um, we had football. Once in a while, we would get baseball, but our television came from the air. So if you put foil on the antennas on the TV, you could get a few more channels. Happy Days. We could get Happy Days once in a while. I remember my dad. He would get the antenna on the TV just right, and nobody touch it. That was when the Tampa Bay Bucks were playing. Stay away from the television set. So, but I'm from Florida, and Mean Gene Ogerline. He lived in the town I was born in, and we would see him out at a restaurant that I used to go to, and it was neat running into him. He was a local celebrity. This is after he retired. He was out more because he wasn't traveling as much, and his health was failing. Uh, every time we'd see him, one of his arms was pretty swollen up from whatever health issue he was having. But he was always the nicest, kindest person that you could run into. And I remember I was on a date with a girl once, and he raised her arm up in the air and said, "World Heavyweight Champion, so and so," and just the nicest guy. And that's the only connection to wrestling I have is just running into him and him saying hi to me, and I say hi to him and stuff. And most of the time we just let him be because he was out enjoying himself, and not many people would come up and bother him for pictures and stuff. But Hulk Hogan was down in Key West once, and I think we just missed him. He was walking down the street. I think the Hard Rock Cafe had a restaurant there, and he was coming out of that and going down the street, and everybody said, "Oh, you just missed Hulk Hogan," and that's back when he was wearing his fanny pack where he was keeping all his vitamins in them and stuff. So, but I was into wrestling with Dusty Rhodes, Wahoo McDaniel, Ric Flair, Lex Luthor was even running the circuit down here when he first got started. The Junkyard Dog, the Iron Sheik, all those early guys, Art Anderson. Those guys pretty much, set the stage that Hulk Hogan stepped onto and then eventually took over. And I wasn't a real big fan of that wrestling, but I had respect for it, its roots were, you know, um, planted by, you know, folks like the Wyndham Brothers, Blackjack Mulligan, Dusty Rhodes, and stuff. And he took his alter uh, image, ego, whatever you want to call it, and took it into a different universe. You know, they stopped, you know, all the blood, all the stuff that wrestling had built its reputation on, and got rid of it. So it was more of a glitz and glamour and more like Super Bowl events and stuff type wrestling deals, you know. And that's smart business. You know, I like business. I like studying people who start and own businesses and stuff. And, you know, Vince McMahon got his start, uh, you know, with his father in the old school wrestling days. He was a commentator. He would interview the wrestlers and stuff. And, you know, Vince took it to a whole new level. And he was lucky that, you know, he had someone like Terry signed up working for him, you know, because they just took wrestling to a whole nother level. But I still had one foot stuck in the old school wrestling, you know. He died today. And, you know, you're losing your childhood, you know. One celebrity person at a time, your childhood's slowly disappearing. And I didn't know him personally, um, but you know he liked to go to Hooters all the time. He had, you know, a store in Orlando, and he had his restaurant, and he had his TV show, and you feel like you know these people because they're on your television and they're in your house because television invites all sorts of stuff into your house. So you feel like you kind of know these people, you know. Um, and it's a big deal. If you're on social media right now, all you're seeing is Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan. You know, the dude's like Elvis Presley status, you know, right now. Um, I remember when I was a kid, it was in the 80s, the early 80s. And this kid named Kendall, he was on our baseball team. And in the 80, 81, 82, was like the first big event that they had. They had this, like the Super Bowl of wrestling, I forget what you called it. And Kendall invited all of us from the baseball team to stay the night at the house he was living at. I guess his dad and mom had been separated or divorced, and his dad was making pretty good money and had this really big house. And so it's WrestleMania, and it might have been the first WrestleMania. And you know they invited the whole baseball team um, to come over and watch the WrestleMania. You know, it was, I guess, you know, you had to pay for it, and I think we had satellites back then. Some of my friends had satellites, and you paid for it. So we tried to stay up as late as we could. We had hot dogs. We ran around this big property and stuff, and WrestleMania didn't come on until like midnight. So us kids, you know, we're 8 years old, maybe 9, just barely hanging on, you know, and waiting for the main event. And Hulk Hogan was in that main event. And I remember the colors, the colors that they were wearing and dressed up in, and you know, like this Cyndi Lauper era, everything was bright, and their outfits were bright, and you know, and Hulk Hogan would rip his shirt off, and you know, get the crowd going and stuff. And you know, later on in life, I realized he had cut little slits in his shirt so that he could rip his shirt open a little bit easier. But as kids, that was cool. I wanted to be part of the gang, the group, the club, whatever. And I wasn't very popular with kids back then. I got picked on a lot because I was skinny and goofy looking and had buck teeth. And Mom always made me wear red sweaters and parted my hair down the side. So I look like Buck Owens in a red sweater. And, just if I wasn't on the baseball team, I probably wouldn't have been invited to WrestleMania at this kid Kendall's house. Super cool dude, super nice. His dad was super nice. And I think he bought us all pizza at like 9 o'clock, after we had hot dogs and stuff. He spared no expense for this sleepover party. But, and then Hulk Hogan was in Rocky and stuff. And, I never really followed his career much, but I was interested in all the things that he was doing in business, the things that he was successful at, the things he failed at. He had his TV show. He did Thunder Bay or whatever. That was a big flop. He never really broke into movies and became like a movie star, but he always held on to that, I'm an American hero type character. I'm a real American, however that song went. But it got you emotionally charged up when he would come running down the ramp, and oh, what you gonna do, brother, and all that stuff. As a kid, we just ate that stuff up. But you know, I'm always and going to always be a Dusty Rhodes fan. I just followed Hulk Hogan's career because I was just interested. It was interesting. Not so much for the drama. The George Foreman grill. He should have got the George Foreman grill, but he didn't answer the phone call when the phone call came, and they were saying, "Hey, you want the grill?" And he turned the grill down, and then he took the shaker that you shake up protein mix in and stuff. So he put his name on the shaker thing, and that was a bomb. And he said that was the biggest mistake of his career was turning down the George Foreman grill. Now, whether he turned it down or kept missing the phone call that kept coming in, asking him to do it or not, that's kind of in a mystery. It's folklore or whatever. But I believe from my research that he turned the George Foreman grill down, and that's been the biggest business mistake that he's ever made. So, but tough day for the wrestling world for sure. And we're fans. We're just normal human beings living out their lives. And you pick your phone up. Your iPhone will tell you all sorts of stuff. You're looking at your iPhone. Hulk Hogan died. So, and it just kind of like tips your cart upside down. I don't want anybody to die. Especially people like, well, I'm not saying, it's okay people die or not. I'm just saying when people like well-known people like Hulk Hogan die, it's kind of, it's kind of like a real big deal. They're gone. You can't talk to them no more. You're not going to see him on TV. I think the last time he was out doing something, he was booed, in California somewhere, and they booed him, I guess they didn't like his politics or something, but what a shame that was, And, after his divorce, he got into American beer and stuff. And, he was still trying to, brand himself and do things business-wise and stuff. And, I rooted for the guy. He had his scandals and his, steroids and whatever and stuff. And, I get it. I probably would have done steroids if I pass out when I see like needles and blood. So I never did steroids because of that stuff. And all the people in my life were like, if you did, 6-week cycle of steroids, you'd be like 225, and you'll make the baseball team and stuff. And needles freak me out. You need like 6 people to hold me down to jab me with a needle. So. That's why I never did steroids. But when I see or hear about Hulk Hogan, one of the first things that comes to my mind is steroids. And then his divorce, TV show, then wrestling, and it kind of trickles down the slide. So pretty impactful. What his death means to a lot of people, and it's a shame. 71 years old, and I did a video this morning. You know, time's running out. People are dying all the time. He's a multimillionaire. 71 years old. His number was called. You know, so just have the most positive mental attitude you can. You never know when you're gonna get your wings or your number's gonna be called, and start that business, buy that house, pay that house off. Call somebody up that you're not getting along with, and tell them you love them. While we're still here, call your parents up if they're still here. You know. Well, this is Russell with Russell Does Stuff, and this is my reaction to Hulk Hogan passing away. And it's a sad day for a lot of people. We, pray for his family, his kids, his ex-wife, his new wife, and that's all we can do. So we'll catch you on the next one.